Thank you for being here this morning. This is the meeting of the Volusia Forever Advisory Committee for the purpose of placing the applicant properties in either the A or the B list. I will ask that you please call the roll.
Marianne Connor, Wanda Van Dam,
Here.
Steve Crump,
Here.
Gerald Peaser,
Here.
John Gamble, Jessica Gow, Derek LaMontagne, Derek Orberg,
Here.
Suzanne Schreiber.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Warren, thank you so much. And this morning, we have some folks who have signed up for public participation. If your participation is to answer questions only, I'll allow you to have the option if you wish to wait for the item to come up and then respond to questions at that time, that's fine. But if you'd like to make a statement now, likewise. You have 3 minutes to make your comments. Anyone who wishes to speak now? Michael.
Good morning.
One.
I just wanted to make a brief statement in favor of the Volusia Groves and cattle application. Last year, you heard me come during the listening sessions talking about, properties inside cities and trying to preserve, these gems. And so, we're here today to support the 126 acre piece of land I call the Lake Moore property. Hopefully you all saw the drone video that I took of the property. It's pretty fantastic. And I think it will give residents and future residents the ability to enjoy this pristine natural habitat with endangered species. The city is committed to taking care of the land management, and we look forward to creating a passive park similar to Deltona, Leone and Deltona. In addition to the land management, which will create a savings for the Forever program, the city is willing to provide a cash match subject to the appraisal of the property so that I can take a specific amount to the city commission. I know that the application package didn't include that, but we are willing to do that. I just don't know what the amount would be because we don't know what the appraised value would be.
Percentage?
I'm sorry? We're looking at, I think staff said like 30%, or 33% is kind of historical. We did do that before in 2008 when we tried to get this property on the A list. The city did a participation agreement in that amount. So that would be the amount we would target. It meets 13 of your criteria and received the highest ranking by staff. So I think that's a good indication that it's a good piece of property. The board unanimously supported it, as being qualified at your last meeting. In closing, you've already determined that the property is a good fit. However, we cannot find out whether or not it's a good deal unless you put it on the A list. So let's put it on the A list and get this property preserved for our residents. And I'll answer questions at the time.
Thank you.
Karen Chazay, Mayor DeBerry. I'm here to speak on behalf of item 10, the Resicar property. I hope you all have had a chance to look at the drone video that we provided as well. I've spoken to you before about this property. We are 2 years into this process of securing this for public access, this 170 acres of land with two miles of frontage on the St. Johns River. And it's an important piece of property within our city boundaries. Looking at the entire properties within the city of DeBerry, and I don't expect that we will expand boundaries and that we abut adjacent cities. I believe that in the next 20 years, this is our only property. And because that will qualify for Volusia Forever, having been through the Florida Forever process to date, as well as the Volusia Forever process to date, I can't identify any other properties that will come before this board for funding. And DeBerry strongly supported, I think as all voters did, the reauthorization of this program. But when we began work on this property, there was no ability to put an application in for Volusia Forever. There was no open process at that time. So we have proposed, since we have Florida Forever already working. We have this application with Volusia. We have proposed a 3-to-1 match, envisioning 3 partners involved. And if for some reason Florida Forever would not be there timely, we can revisit that. There is a strong commitment in our community to secure this and not to see the uplands, which are entitled for some housing, be developed. And that pressure is increasing as time passes. We've had a very patient owner, trust, that has walked with us through this process. But I personally believe we need to bring it across the finish line this year. And for that reason, and the fact that it was deemed to be eligible by all of you, I ask that it be put on the A list, and I will be happy to answer additional questions when item 10 is brought to the table. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Senior Assistant County West Bryan. I just want to make sure for the record, Ms. Gallo is present, so all done. People are.
Madam Chair, I'm Carmen Rosemont, I'm the city manager of the city of DeBerry. Wanted to talk to you about this particular property known as the Rest-A-Car property on your agenda. The Rest-A-Car property is one of a kind. Back in the 1950s, berm was established on this property, but it's become part of nature. If you walk out onto this particular berm, I want you to understand that since many of y'all haven't been there, to the left is 150 acres of prairie and marshland, and to the right is the St. Johns River. When you go onto the beaches of Daytona and you look out over the ocean, you get that feeling of the world is greater than life. And you get that same feeling when you walk out onto this particular berm, that there's nothing but pure nature. The only difference between the beaches and this particular property is the St. Johns River, and that's the ocean. The other part is when you turn around and look at the beaches, you got nothing but hotels and cars. There's nothing but nature on this particular property. We put together a leadership team over the last 2 years in the city of DeBerry, and that also incorporates a partnership with the Aquatic Preserve Alliance of Central Florida. Both to not only preserve this particular property for nature, but also to attack the initiative of water quality. They are a citizen support organization of the FDEB, and they're going to be a critical partner as we move forward. I don't know if you know or not, but DeBerry is 98% of DeBerry is Stream Basin. Half in Blue Springs, half in Gemini Springs. Both of them are outstanding springs. And this partnership, 3 main principles of this particular nonprofit organization, have 85 years of experience in water quality and improving water quality throughout the state of Florida. The other thing is that one of the folks from the Audubon Society who's been out there, because there are endangered species out on this particular property, told me that they kind of hit home to me. And he said one of the best things for conservation is to let folks feel it, touch it, and see it. And when you feel it, touch it, and see it, you build a whole nother generation of conservationists. And both the Aquatic Preserve Alliance and the city of DeBerry is committed to make this property an educational piece to create the next generation of conservationists. The DeBerry City's investment, yes, it's 25% initially. But we also put in the application that will take care of the management here on forward and all of the improvements to the property forward, which would be, in our opinion, 5 to 10 million over the next 10 years. Thank you very much.
This is for Shelley. All right. Good morning. My name is Deborah Shelley. I'm the president of the Aquatic Preserve Alliance of Central Florida. As Mr. Rosemont mentioned, we are a citizen support group for the Highland Hill St. John's Aquatic Preserve. And I'm just here to support the mayor's comments and the city manager's comments as well. And as a citizen support group, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are dedicated to promoting and supporting charitable, educational, and scientific endeavors for the Old Hill St. John's Aquatic Reserve. And we also want to raise awareness of and educate the public about the ecosystems associated with the Little St. John's River. We have a number of educators on our board. We have folks who are professors at Professor Seminole State College. We have a professor from Rollins College. We have colleges. We have a professor from the University of Central Florida. And we're all dedicated to raising awareness and educating the public about the St. John's River. So I appreciate this opportunity. And again, I support the mayor's comments and the city manager's comments. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Anyone else?
Good morning. I appreciate this opportunity to speak before you all. Our families, excuse me, I'm Lisa Ford Williams. We are very excited that Volusia Forever and Volusia Echo were approved again because there are so many great opportunities for our county, our residents and our visitors. I'm here today to talk specifically about the Volusia River County Moore Lake property. I just wanted to let you know that we've been would like to be a part of this project. Tried for originally back in 2007. The property was approved by the committee to be submitted to the county council, and it was on the B list, and we didn't come to an agreement at that time. So it was moved to the B list, and we requested it. And then in 2018, we started speaking with Michael Lewis in the city, who then we engaged with Trust for Public Lands. And although they don't acquire property, they were going to be the conduit to help us or help the city while they were looking to line up the funding that they could have an option of bringing with the landowner. And it ended up that the opportunity for the matching grants through the Florida Community Trust that funding dried up. So that's why we're here today. We have, I'll be frank, we've received that Michael and I were talking about this even back when we started talking in 2018. We had a significant amount of pressure from homeowners and developers that really have an interest in this property, and we had held them off and told them that we wanted to see through this process. So, please consider it, and we look forward to working with you all. I do have a question. We got another property on the list. I don't know if I should address that very quickly. My comments are very quick. It's on the Tomoka Basin. I think it's under my dad's name, Frank A. Ford Trust. The DEP was actually the lead applicant on the property. We were approached by the state. Phil Rand, who was the Tomoka State Park manager, who's since retired in the fall. And gosh, that was a year ago. And then in October, contacted me again and said that I guess the state, DEP, St. John's, they had all been looking at this property and thought it was a very important piece to try to acquire. And so we submitted the application for Volusia Forever with their, actually, they prepared it, Dad signed it, and then we ended January of this year. So I think the biggest difference from DEP. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that area is part of, it's been the Indian River Lagoon several years ago was extended up to, drawing a blank on the road, sorry, I'm a little nervous here, High Bridge Road, and also that it's part of the EPA's natural, the national inventory, the environmental program, and there's 4 in the state of Florida, there's 28 in the country, and this property falls within that. So some things to consider. I know that there's a lot of ditches and it's mosquito control, but there are some great benefits that we support. So thank you so much for your time.
That was regarding item 6. Anyone else who care to speak at this time? With that, we have approval of the meeting minutes from the meeting of January 26th. I would just make an incidental comment. My name changes. Here and there. Thank you much. Okay. Does anyone have any comments? I have a motion for adoption of the minutes.
So
Motion and second, all those in favor of accepting the minutes, please signify aye.
Aye.
Sign. Thank you.
My name is also spelled.
Well, I got mine right, and that's usually unusual, so I'm happy.
With that, we have old business.
Good morning, Chair, committee members. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Guess I need to get really close to this thing. Do my best throughout the morning. Tim Telfer, my petition manager for the I'm going to go, before we get into the old business, I just want to show you a brief slide over here to give a little background on today's.
So you're really gonna need to get close to the mic. I'm not picking you up at all.
Okay, can you advance the slide, please? Okay, so as the chair has mentioned, the purpose of today's meeting is to place the properties that were determined to be eligible for the Volusia Forever program. This was at the January 26th meeting, where the committee determined a series of properties were eligible for the program. You're going to be determined by selecting them for the A or B group today. Essentially, what you need to understand is that the A group these are the properties that have the most significant, highest priority values here. These are the properties, when we present them to the county council, the recommendation for the A list are going to be the properties that the county staff will be actively pursuing at the time. The B list are properties that are eligible and important, but they don't have the highest priority based upon any number of factors. A couple of things to go over though. We've done our best to give you the tools to help you select between the A and B list for these properties here. I do want to emphasize that the county council has selected you for this committee for your experience and your judgment. So there may be matters beyond the material that the county staff has presented to you that you use in your selection process. And I encourage you, if there is a point in time this morning where you feel like you're stuck, we're going to work to make a decision and work through those matters and get it on the A or B list. We really don't want to see any properties end up kind of being deferred. So the other thing that I want to touch on this morning, when we talk about this sorting process here, we're not talking about the price of the property. The dollar amount is really not significant, nor is it something that you need to consider when you're selecting how many go onto the A list. That's going to be the exclusive purview of the county council. So we're asking you to look at these properties as the puzzle pieces. How do they fit within the ecosystem services? How do they benefit the community? How do they benefit the wildlife and natural systems? Try it again and one more time, please. A little bit of background here. We do talk in our reports. I know you've all had the opportunity to read them, and this may be just unnecessary review, but we want to make sure that there's a basic foundation of understanding from the audience and amongst the committee members, or the advisory committee members themselves. We talk about land use and zoning in these reports. Future land use is a designation that really it's found in the future land use element of the comprehensive plan. And this is something that county council will do to really establish the density and intensity allowed within certain areas of the county. There's also a table that matches up zoning classifications and future land use categories. And so those zoning classifications are also discussed in the report. And then they basically deal with the characteristics of how those properties can be developed. This can be things like setbacks. This can be things like minimum lot size or parking spaces here. So we do go in there, and I think it's important to point those out because they help the advisory committee when you're doing your review on these projects. It helps you understand how the county council, at staff's recommendation, has categorized these properties over time. And you'll see some clues as to some of them have some important, are viewed to have some important environmental. Now, one more slide, please. So additionally, out of that growth management department, we've also pointed out some overlays. These are on top of your future land use and zoning categories. These are additional restrictions that are placed on a piece of property. We pointed the two overlays out on the screen here that you've encountered in your reports, that you've encountered on mapping. This provides even more background to help you make your judgment as to which are the most important properties and should be moved to the areas themselves. So that's a little bit of background on the process. One more thing I'll mention as we work through the morning, you've already heard me, I need to pull the microphone very close here. If you all can make sure when you speak, you have your microphones on, that'll help us in the writing as we work through the minutes and background material for this meeting here. And with that, we're going to move on to some properties that have been in the pipeline for a period of time, and I'm going to turn it over to Brad.
Yes, next slide, please, Jill. So we thought to give that context to the committee on the A and B list, as well as designations, was important before we got to the previously approved A list. So there is a previously approved A list under the previous program, which does not disappear because it was a council approved list. And so we have a few properties that have either said they want to be retained on the A list or have resubmitted as part of the program to let us know that they're interested. So they will remain on the A list that we're presenting to council. So the first property I wanted, for the sake of transparency, I wanted to make sure that when this list goes to council, this property will be on it, and I want you to know why, because it didn't come before you until now. So that's the Doan piece. This Doan piece was put on the list in 2009. It's approximately 4 acres. At the time, there were 22 site ranking criteria, of which it met 10. I did have my team do the site ranking criteria under our newly adopted criteria, and it met 10 of the 19, so it would be eligible under the new criteria as well. At the time, there was a funding partner who had some interest in the water management district. We haven't spoken to them about this piece at this point in time. So the Doan property will be on the A list that we present to council on April 5th. Next slide, please. The next piece on the A list is the Mazika piece, which is in just outside the border of the town of Ponce Inlet. 48 acres at the time. It met 13 of the 22 site ranking criteria. Again, my team reevaluated this using the new criteria and would certainly qualify for a fee simple acquisition, and it is adjacent to Ponce Preserve Conservation Area. So this will also be on the A list. Next slide. The next piece is one that we had came to you with in April at one of your very first meetings. And we asked you, we had been approached by the Water Management District, who was looking for a partner to acquire approximately 1,200 acres, combination of fee simple and conservation easement. They wanted to acquire it, but they needed a funding partner to make it happen. And so at that time, we had brought their proposal to the committee. We had scored it and written a project evaluation report that you've seen today for all of the others. And the committee, through a unanimous motion, said that the properties meet the goals and the criteria of the Volusia Forever program. So at that point in time, staff continued to negotiate and work with the Water Management District. And we're at a point now where we've reached agreements with the property owners. And just an overview of them again, it's 858 acres is the fee simple. It is adjacent to the Palm Bluff Conservation Area, so it will expand that 3,300 acre preserve that's owned and managed by the Water Management District. It's in the Volusia Conservation Corridor and the Wildlife Corridor as well. It meets 13 of 18 criteria. Again, this was evaluated using the criteria that we had in place in April, not the new criteria. It was reevaluated using the new criteria and it meets 12 of the 19, so still eligible for acquisition. Next slide, please. And this is the other piece of that, the partnership deal that we're working with the Water Management District. It's three siblings. So you have the Schroeder-Bowman piece, which is the fee simple, and then you have the Russell piece, which is a 422-acre conservation easement that met 13 of the 18. Again, the Water Management District is our partner, and we're ready to move forward. And as you can see there, it's adjacent to Palm Bluff and the conservation corridor and wildlife. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have, but I wanted, in the sake of full transparency, to understand as we tweak the A list, the previously approved A list, based on this information, I wanted the committee to be fully aware of what's going on.
Thank you, Brad. The action you're looking for is to place the subject properties on the current A list.
What I would ask, so the Doan and Mazika piece are already on the approved A list, which we're using. However, Schroeder, Russell, Bowman, there was an eligibility vote by this committee in April, but there was not a vote to put it on the A list. So that would be, I believe, what I'm asking.
So can I get a motion to that?
And I'll move to put those properties.
I'd second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
So just, can you bring up the first map of the Doan property? I just have a technical question. So right below the Doan property is like a little white area on the map, on the second map, which I guess is the water way. And but like right above that, it's a lake. And immediately it becomes green. If you know what I'm saying, in the middle one there. And the water, like obviously continues. So is that white that is below the Doan property? Is that like essentially a publicly owned area? Is it waters of, navigable water or something along those lines? Just explain how that works and then why immediately if we've actually paid to acquire some waterways like this. If you don't know that.
No, Danielle. All it is doing mapping.
Danielle Daniel,
Yeah.
Resource Stewardship. It's actually just mapping on there. It's, the white, like you said, is Murray Creek. If you look at the aerial next to it, it aligns with that. And the actual green is part of North Stewardship Creek Reserve. So it's not like the creek disappears. It's just mapping what layers are on top.
Okay, so I guess is that Murray Creek kind of part of the preserve in that sense?
No.
That white part is, but then the part where it ends, does become part of the preserve. I mean, like the white roughly. Otherwise,
You could look at it like that, but yes, we don't have ownership of Murray Creek as far as the county.
I'll just add on to that. The second part of your question, I believe, somebody bought Creek here. There's a whole backstory about sovereign, these are state-owned lands held in public trust. Essentially, the state already owns them. Backstory on further down the road before it became state, etc. But under those circumstances, no, we're not able to buy these services.
Thank you. With that, we'll begin new business. Baylor Garden?
Good morning, Nick Dunham. I'll start off this today with the Baylor property. Baylor property is known as an agricultural easement under the forest and farmlands. roughly 3,600 acres. It is in the wildlife corridor and abuts the 3,500 acre presently conservation area managed by the St. Johns River Water Management District. As you can see from our site visit, it does contain some open water wetland ponds, some pasture, and some upland areas, potentially sandhill scrubby type uplands.
I'm noting that this particular project was also on a previous A list.
That is correct.
And did it come off the A list because inability to reach an agreement or just?
The best I can describe it is we look back through the files, there was a series of offers and counter offers that were not accepted. We can't tell you that story is going to come out.
I have a question. From the previous A list, was it for an easement or a purchase?
There were offers for both.
Any questions from the committee? None?
This isn't specific to this property, but given the fact that it's in the wildlife corridor, with the Florida legislation that's going on right now, is there an additional chance for funding for the wildlife corridor should this legislation go through? Or is that just completely dependent on the coast?
So there is wildlife corridor funding that passed last year, 300 million that was set aside. This project at the current state would not qualify for that funding because in order to qualify for wildlife corridor funding, it has to meet two criteria. It has to be in the wildlife corridor, but it also has to be in a Florida Forever project area. So one of the things that we've discussed at the staff level, and I'll just inform the committee of, is we've met with USDA representatives on the property where we think that we may have a partner in terms of an easement program. But if that doesn't work, we've discussed at the staff level of developing a Florida Forever project application specifically for this project and bringing it to the state if our first activities or actions and trying to establish a partner does not work.
Brad, I have a question. Do you have a good quality map of the Florida Wildlife Corridor running through Volusia County? I have not really seen a really good map.
Yes, we can. I can certainly share that with the committee and post it on the Volusia Forever webpage. We have a map.
That's been the biggest question that I keep getting asked. That's been the number one question.
So to supplement that, January 26th, we had kind of a master map that was included in your package. That's your wildlife corridor. Go back to that map.
I understand, but I attended the presentation that Jason Lauritsen did from the Florida Wildlife Coalition, and he presented a map throughout the state, and he actually had one for Volusia County. And I have to tell you, it was far more detailed and easily visible. And I asked him to provide one to the county. I don't know if he got with you with this, but it's really needed because it's much clearer and more detailed than what you're currently using. I'm asking for something better.
I'm sorry, Suzanne, who was that you were referencing?
Jason Lauritsen with the Florida Wildlife Coalition. He did a presentation for the wildlife corridor in the state of Florida at the Tiger Bay Club in February, and I attended that event. He's the head of the coalition for the state, and the presentation that he did was specifically concerning Volusia County, and it was very enlightening and educational. And he did use a map that he created himself, but I spoke to him at the meeting asking him to provide that to Volusia County. I believe he met with staff, and the map that we're using is not as detailed, so I'd just really like to see something more detailed with the corridor on town.
Well, I think we can certainly look at the map, that we have, maps in public hearings, publicly produced, that I think are important in terms of providing regulations.
The Florida Wildlife Corridor Coalition is the main coalition representing and fighting for the corridor in the state. So,
Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion? Questions, Joe?
You know, as y'all know, I'm a strong proponent of conservation easements, and I would, are we looking for a motion to put them on the A and B?
Exactly.
And I would like to move that we put this on the A list. You know, given the past history, I don't know what the probability of success is, but I'd like to give it another shot. So I would put it on the list. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those like sign?
Next slide, please. So I'm going to introduce the next three applications. There's a common thread of ownership throughout all three of them, as well as they are essentially in the same geographic area and largely contiguous. So the first one of the three is Stewart Howard piece, 1,900 acres in size. All three are fee simple, proposed as fee simple acquisitions. 1,900 acres in size. We are within the Florida Forever boundaries, in the Indian River Lagoon Blueway area here. Has both of the eco and NRMA overlays. We are within the wildlife corridor and Bucks Turtle County Conservation Area. We're able to view the properties on all three here. It's a bit of a mix of some mixed wetland hardwoods, floodplain, swamp, hydro county. Some of those upland areas tend to be hardwood dominated on. Next slide, please. Next one is simply titled Stewart Family, 274 acres in size, still within the Florida Forever boundary of the Blueway. Both the NRMA and eco overlays are still in effect. It is also within the wildlife corridor, also a Bucks Turtle County Conservation Area. Similar natural communities here, floodplain swamp, hydroclimate, strand swamp, and those uplands tend to be, upland hardwood forest communities. Third one is, next slide please. Third one is CMM and CF Investments, 195 acres in size, still within the Florida Forever boundary of the Indian River Lagoon Blueway. Same criteria, NRMA, eco overlays, wildlife corridor, Bucks Terminal, Hammond Conservation Area, similar natural communities. As we open up the discussion with the advisory committee, Jill, can you get forward one more time? So we've got a master map there. If you could take a look at everything in red is all three of those applications. And you can see how they interact both with Turtle Hammond Conservation Area. You can see the designation of the Florida Forever boundary overlaid on top of them. And we are encouraging, we've essentially treated all three in the same manner. And I think if I would give you any advice, I would encourage you to do the same, treat all three either in, say, A or B group categorization. With that, I'll turn it over to the
I have a question regarding the district's position regarding this acquisition. They have adjacent property. They don't seem to be interested in that position. In management.
So we did not have a discussion about management on this property here, so I can't speak for the one.
Total acreage for all three?
Total acreage is roughly 2,500 acres.
May I ask, this is a more general question, but specific to the water management district. Where are they in the hierarchy now of land acquisition in Florida? The programs seem to be in flux.
large amount of the Florida River money now moves through. Historically, the water management districts had a lot of funds, and there's a great history of the Volusia Forever program and the water management district partnering up on acquisitions. We've met with the water management district's acquisition staff. The pieces, the Russell Schroeder Bowman pieces that you saw before, I'm going to speak generally here, but that's largely the last amount of money they have this fiscal year. When we met with them, we were having open dialogue with their advisory board on ways to generate more funds for land acquisition. But I think those 3 projects that you saw in the past are the last bit of funding that we can expect from them, at least this fiscal year. If they get another tranche of funds in the next fiscal year, we are certainly going to sit down with them and introduce them to the projects that we place on the meetings.
For these 3 properties, I think they're important to note that because of the swampy nature, there's not really public access and recreation from a management perspective. That makes our burden and we were the manager easier.
It would make management of that type of property more challenging for access. At the same time, with that amount of wetlands, there's not as much management to do.
I have a question too. We can talk about access. You know, I'm trying to study the maps a little bit. Is it possible to put a walking trail or something through that property for access, public access, anywhere there could be a parking corral if you wanted to? That's what forever properties have.
Yes, there is potential for parking access.
But I will caveat that statement. They could park, but they're not going to walk very far until they get to a swamp. So it's isolated uplands unless we build boardwalks. Presently, the water management does not allow the recreation on Turnbull Hammock Conservation Area for that reason. So it was more a purchase to protect the water quality of the Indian River Lagoon.
Questions? I will say, many years ago, I drove through Vulcan Road. This is beautiful, beautiful land. I know it's wet, get there, but it's quite beautiful in terms of public preservation and whatnot. So, can we do a motion on the 3? Is that allowed? Yes. Okay, so I would prefer to treat these as a unit, and they're certainly joined to each other. So if there's a motion,
All moving lists. We place items 2, 3, and 4.
motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Nay.
And so the name was Steve. Thank you so much.
All right, next up, we have the Carter Volusia Land Trust. Fee simple acquisition submission, roughly 1,300 acres. It's in the wildlife corridor, and it is southwest corner is directly adjacent to the 8,000 acre Deep Creek Reserve that is owned and managed by the county. It has a reservoir on the property, well, and it has a lot of pine upland flatwoods.
Yeah, I got a quick comment. This tract really impressed me in that it's in the right area, right size. Historical purposes, it looks like the right thing we should be supporting.
Any other questions or comments? This again was a property formerly on a list.
Did have a history with the prior owner, but yes, it wasn't.
And subsequently removed. So we're getting, again, it's another opportunity. Has there been much alteration since that time?
I can't speak to the history over the last 15 years, the history of activity on the property.
It appears from the site visit that it continued forest or timber management program on the property.
Where's the,
I'm sorry, but did you just say that was the borrow pit there?
Yeah, there is a borrow pit that was on the property, and we did research there. They're in compliance with the state permit on the borrow pit.
Like to make a motion to put item number 5 on the list.
I'll second the motion.
Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Next property for consideration is Frankfort Trust parcel. This is 1,200 acres northeast of Volusia County. Has also the NRMA overlay on it. It is adjacent to Beaver Creek State Park on 3 sides. And the portion is connected to the North Peninsula State Park. I have had some dialogue with Jason. Jason works for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. He's a biologist, but also one of the people that put in the application for this property. They are outside of this program also applying for Florida forever funding. We've had communication with DEP. They're going to have this property in front of their review board for funding and permitting. As I mentioned, it's 1,200 acres in size. It is a large mixture of estuarine and saltwater marsh, but there are uplands on the property. It's accessed through the state park itself. There's a long, we call it a causeway, but it certainly is a filled area that is accessible for people and traffic. And as you move out, there's uplands on both southern and northern side. The uplands tend to be, your typical hardwood hammock area that has not seen prescribed fire in some time. We go to the state park if you're interested in sort of prescribed fire. There's areas in the same position. But with that background, that's really
I have a question. Is Mr. Dupuy here today?
No, Mr. Dupuy was not able to attend.
Is there anyone from St. John's here that's representative of this property?
Not that I'm aware.
So I took a tour of this property, and I toured it with Mr. Dupuy and also a representative from St. John's and Tim. And it is, so the State Park Service purchased the piece of land that's directly south. As you go out to this property, there is a dirt road, and the north side of the road is the property itself that's up for purchase, and the south side was recently purchased. I believe it was in January of 2020, Tim, something like that. 2019, maybe it was in January in the last 2 years. So the State Park Service is looking at expanding it. But what the discussion was, and I asked a ton of questions, what the discussion was that the marsh be restored by the state park in St. John's and in cooperation, and that they would possibly maintain the land, if I understood correctly from Tim's nodding his head. And so even north of this land, there is additional marsh that could be restored. So there would be a very large, significant area restored collectively.
It can be developed because even though the entrance is through the state park, there's a gate there and there's private land back there. That's what the state park is trying to accomplish, is purchasing the land to get it all under protection. And as I said, they purchased the land on the south side. The land on the south side of the road was actually private land that had a fishing camp on it. Someone had set up shop back there. We did see that as well. They were using it and fishing right there. It's along the river. And I just would like to say that when I attended the Florida Wildlife Corridor Coalition presentation, afterwards it was pointed out to me that we have 2 pockets of wildlife in our county. One of them is down near, basically in Oak Hill. Oak Hill is undeveloped, fairly pristine, and the Ormond Scenic Loop with the state park services and the land that's remaining. They're considered pockets of wildlife because they're detached from the corridor, but nevertheless, that doesn't make them any less valuable. So, Jason just spoke to me frankly about saving the wildlife pockets that are outside the corridor because no one is really stepping up to discuss this publicly. Most of the time along the river, there's less discussed. The corridor itself is where we're at. So did he give you a date in April concerning the funding?
He did, and I'm gonna keep my notes, try to find it right now. It was early April. I believe it's after the date, so staff intends to bring these to the county council. I believe it was after that. 6 or 7. This decision would be made by the state.
So we will be voting at a later date though, or more than once this year on placing properties on the A list and the B list, correct?
That is correct. We're going to go over the calendar year schedule at the end of this presentation, but there are going to be future meetings of the advisory committee to consider properties for A and B list. And anything that is placed on the B list today may be moved.
So I would like to make a motion to wait on determining whether this property would be placed on the A list or the B list as to what happens with the DEP funds with Florida Forever.
Suzanne, that's referring, I think it was placed on the B list. You can then change it to the A list.
How long do we have to wait before we can vote again on the B list? To move a property from the B list to the A list?
The county council could actually bring it up too. I mean, the county council can move it from B to A.
Correct. But the county council did not tour the property and have the discussion with DEP. I don't know if DEP would come to that meeting. There's a lot of speculation there. So,
August would be the next meeting that you would be able to move it from B to A.
I pose a question, and this is just for general commentary, because when we discussed the eligibility of this property, we struggled with it because.
Well, it had an 8-1 vote. It originally had a
I
9-0
understand.
vote, but then it went to 8-1.
But there was some thought, at least mine, was that part of making it eligible was to be able to be a partner, not necessarily to be the owner. And I think that's still in keeping with what's being discussed here, that there are other parties of interest. I think the value of this area is still to the park.
The park is within our
I'm
county.
sorry, I'm speaking. I think the value of the area is primarily to the park, and the park management will be important in terms of how it's then treated and treated. So,
Tim, didn't the park say that they were going to maintain the land? Am I missing something? Didn't the Park Service say that they were willing to maintain the land?
Yes, their staff said that they would be interested in managing the property. But that was a staff level comment, not necessarily higher level DEP.
I understand.
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry. Steve?
I move we place this property, rank for number 6 property on the B list.
There's a second.
I say.
Any further discussion?
I would like to make one comment on that. Kind of hear what Suzanne, I have a problem putting on the B list now. And this is a case where, you know, we've been looking for partners on projects that we want to do, that we think is important for our deal. This is one that's very important for the state, more so than us. And this is where we need to be the helping partner, you know, kind of coming in to assist them in getting done and not be the lead. So I do concur with the B at this time, but I would really hope that we do get to put it on A list sooner than later.
Tim, just a quick question. All the property up there that's part of that park system from Jamoka and Bulow and North Peninsula Recreation Area, that's all been done through the state. We have, this program has never partnered in that area. Because they bought a lot of property over the years and they've been, you know, giving property.
I'm only aware of state acquisitions in the area.
And I'll say one thing is, that to me should be a state deal. I don't know why they're dragging their feet. For years, they wanted to acquire it and they didn't do it. And I don't know why. They own all the rest of the land around there. They've been very interested in it. I mean, I don't think we need to be the one to assist them in doing that, but maybe, you know, maybe we move to the A list if they can't get off the.
This is unfortunate that Mr. Depew is not here because I believe he could have answered some of these questions. And the last thing that I'm going to say before we actually vote is state parks, all state parks in our county are beneficial to all of us. And I understand that that is a different pool of money, but we look to extend conservation areas of many types. So if we are able to work with Florida Forever and the DEP and the state park system, we benefit as well because it's in our county. So I understand where this committee stands today. I would just point out that I actually toured the area and I'm actually the one who had the discussion. And it's really unfortunate that there's no one here to speak to that.
Eric?
I just have some technical questions and a couple of just general observations. So I guess my first question, just totally about what the area actually is. Since I apologize, I haven't actually been to that exact spot, but is, and I like the idea that it's going to be a ecologically protected area, not so much access, but in terms of access, is it being used at all now for, is there a boat going into the water or anything like that? Or I didn't see like dock or anything. Read it for scientific purposes, like to do marsh studies or something. What is it? Any all access?
So your question centered around waterway access, if I understood it correctly. The best I can comment on that is while we were out there touring the property, that wasn't loaded in the water. There was a pontoon boat that was navigating water adjacent to the dirt road.
So just a few more, sorry, I just started fast. So obviously the property acreage says it's about 1,200, but most of that, or a lot of that is submerged. Probably was brought up last time, but just to refresh my memory on roughly like how much is usually submerged out of that 1,200.
About 300 acres roughly is uplands, because it was around, what, 15%, Tim, I believe?
So
15?
we do have a little bit more data in the report. That my recollection is similar to yours. It was a minor amount of uplands. So the majority is going to be salt marsh and estuary. And again, some more technical questions. And I know we're not deciding based on the appraisal, but it was in the report, so it's one to ask. Or if it makes sense, or I guess how they actually do these appraisals. Because on the previous property, so again, no one else probably knows, or what I was about to say, but the previous, the Carter property, like, you know, the valued at like 3 million and the tax value was at 15,000. This one is valued at 300,000 or 1/10 the price. The estimated tax value is actually like 17,000. So it's just confusing how our tax system works. So like, we're appraising land at 1/10 the value, and then they're actually, I guess it has to do with agricultural. It's nothing. So it's just, because actually, is the water being taxed like that? It's a rich land. No, it's just years.
I think we should not answer the tax collector's questions in this forum. I'll just let those.
I'm just curious because it does have to do with like, are we, no, we're not deciding on that, but I just wanted to prove, you know, as a taxpayer myself.
Got it.
But I do hope you understand someone what I'm saying, and I think, but again, if we do put it on the B list, just, we're not then going to try and contribute any money, is that correct? Sorry for the questions.
So to the properties that you place on the B list today are, and the county council approves that they can be, for that caveat in there also. There's not going to be an active acquisition pursuit of any of the properties on the B list. We're only going to be working with the properties on the B list. If something changes to move a property from the B to the B list.
Yes, I guess defining acquisition is kind of my technical question. So again, if the water management district says they are acquiring it, they're going to manage it, they're going to buy it, they just want us to contribute 20,000, they still, or whatever, some number, 20% of the value, that is considered, we can't do that unless it's on. That's correct.
Yes, the property needs to be on the A list for staff to pursue acquisition.
But I will add a clarification for you, Derek. So if that was the case, so if they are funded through forever, or if they get a resilient grant, Florida Resilient Grant, which they've applied for as well, that changes the circumstances. And so we would come back to you or to council and say, based on the joint partnership that we now have in place, we recommend moving this from B to A, and then we would actively go after it. So it's not going to stay on B forever if something changes. We have some leeway as staff to say this would be a good partnership opportunity, and make a recommendation to you and council to actively pursue it.
That's clarifying, thank you. But when you say we are going to be actively pursuing it, I mean, I would want these other entities to actively pursue it, and we just insist. So yes, I'm still a little confusing if I mean, okay, I understand it has to be on A if you want to, I guess, contribute anyway.
I think A is defining those properties that are going to be pursued for the county to own, have an easement, to manage. In this case, we were talking about the value of the property coming to the state. And that we are trying to leave open the opportunity to be a partner if that becomes part of the equation. And this is a process that would allow them.
Okay, either one of these.
I just have, in general, moving not just this property, but any property that we're waiting to hear back concerning the funding. Like, for example, this is in April. I would like to know the answers to all of those that go on the B list for future funding at the next meeting, because this is so close. I mean, they're finding out their answer in April. And I don't know if we have other properties that we're going to be discussing here where we don't quite have all the information in place before we're voting. That's all. As before we're voting on prioritizing. And I do realize things change all the time. I mean, we have properties that we've already voted on, but in this particular case, it's very close. So if there's any others as well.
Jessica?
I just want to say, I think the message between A and B that I hope we're getting from, in my mind, is that the A list is we're telling staff to moving forward, go out there and you can see if you get things. The B list, because we have the ability to change it ourselves, we're asking to change it at any time. It's saying they're eligible, they're important, but we're not taking it. What I think would be if this got funding in April, you're planning this out for staff, and they needed to know something by July, if government person doesn't do that quick for them. If they needed to know something by July, and they said, county, we need $20,000, I assume that staff would tee up documents for council review in tandem with the review A, so that we wouldn't be on confirm that.
Yes, I can confirm we're working on ways to be as nimble as possible because most people does happen quick.
One last comment. From my standpoint today, my job as I see it is to make the best decision I can with the information I have today, not speculate what will be happening in April. I'm gonna call it.
Vote been called for. All those in favor of placing this property on the B list, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. All right, up for consideration is the Stone Street property. This is submitted as a conservation easement at 368 acres. It is in the wildlife corridor, plus part of the conservation area, and it's actively being managed under the Florida Forest Service Best Management Practices Program. On touring of the property, we can see what active prescribed fire management and are pockets of intact wetlands. The property is on.
Question on this. Does this enhance the function of the properties already in the floodplain and the adjacent areas? In terms of their function, floodplain conservation area? Is it an extension of that same system? Does it enhance the function of that system?
So the wetlands on this property are contiguous with Clark Bay wetlands. There is a hydrologic connection. So does this enhance? Is that the second part of the question?
Yeah. Well, I'll make it one. Does it enhance the function of that system?
I would look at it like this. I think based on the report, on site visit, photographs that are in front of you, the owner is engaged in land management activities at this time. The purpose of the conservation easement in this circumstance would basically be to ensure that those activities are continued in perpetuity beyond the current. So rather than enhancing wetlands there, I think what we're doing is we're preserving.
Any questions?
I'd like to make a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Place the property on the A list as a conservation easement. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Alexa?
Next item for your consideration is the Burton property. This was an application, it's feasible 332 acres in size. There's no funding partner identified with it. This is the headwaters of the Tomoka River. This is the piece when we met on the 26th, I had a discussion about the landfill itself. There's been some statements by the landowner that they are open to removing the landfill area from what's considered for acquisition. We did tour the property. Obviously, you can see the 40-acre landfill out there that's surrounding it. There are 332 acres of the property surrounding it. It's both the headwaters to the Tomoka River, which is in fairly deep wetland areas, as well as some planted silviculture that is ready for some thinning. In addition to that, the only thing I can add is that there is a current cattle site.
Would the cattle lease continue?
So we haven't worked through yet.
Cattle leases are allowed under the current land management program, but that would be assessed in the future as to whether we want to keep that cattle lease for the restoration of these areas.
I know we discussed eligibility for this, like, we discussed potential environmental review, the landfill, and then you said cattle. And then when you were on site, there were no cattle digging that.
I did not observe any of that property themselves.
I have a question too concerning the partners. Be it as that this is right next to the Volusia County landfill, I think they would love to have as a buffer. Have they expressed or have there been any discussions with solid waste about doing a partnership on this property?
Yes, and that's why you see the no funding partner with application as submitted. If it has the landfill, there's absolutely zero interest because we would have to monitor that and would take resources. So, but if it was submitted without the landfill portion, we may have a partner with solid waste in the acquisition.
Question, because the property has had multiple uses over its history. And the primary value seems to be the headwaters area. Is there a way of, we're talking about removing the landfill, but is there a way of isolating that area in terms of what protects the headwaters? As, I know we don't get to choose. This is also up to the it's not our choice, but I just wondered if there had been any consideration in looking beyond eliminating the landfill. Is there an interest maybe in looking at this in ways that might be more demonstrative of an environmental purpose? And it is hard to look at some of the past uses and even some of the current ones and say this is what Volusia Forever was about. It really does seem to be about the headwaters. Any thoughts? Sorry to put you in a dog.
There hasn't at this time. So I would say that the real fear here is development in that area. So if you were to protect the slice of the headwaters, you're still leaving uplands on each side that could be developed that would influence the ecology or the quality of that wetland system that's high functioning.
I'm mindful of the fact that this is also very near an interstate interchange. It has a lot of potential in a lot of directions. So, any other questions, comments?
Quick comment. I always struggle with all the strips that are owned through the middle of it. I think that's so much. You protect part of it, only not to protect all of it. And it's in a place that should probably be developed.
It's not that. This one, I'm not fond of. Would like to comment that, yeah, I do like where this is personally, because I don't like to see stuff developed in that area anymore. It's, I don't know, basically, pressure. So that was why I support it, because of the development around there, especially, like you said, this is literally where the 200 starts. It start, but I think the length of was the issue. I thought there was talk of they would adjust that, but they haven't. Interesting, but still, I'd like us to pursue it, and then it's up to if it can be reached, I guess, with all of the contract cattle and so forth. I assume we can have to get cattle on there. But it's not hard. They still be able to keep cattle. I have no idea. Smart.
Under a fee simple purchase, we would take over the area and the cattle would be leased out.
I would like to see it pursued at least to some degree. So I will make a motion to put on the list and just see what happens.
I'll second that.
Motion in the second.
Yeah, I do have a question, because if it passes, can you make this conditional, that one, that we do find a partner, or that solid waste partner with us, or two, that we exclude the landfill? Because I don't want to pursue it if we're going to get to it. I want the landfill, unless somebody says, oh yeah, we want to manage it. I'm not going to recommend.
I toured this property. I was sitting here listening to kind of see where all this was going to go based on me saying I toured the last property. I just want to say that the area that's the wetlands was a little closer to the road when we entered the property. And it was quite cut up, as you're saying. There was a deer that ran across in front of our truck at one point at the back of the property. The landfill, the county landfill was right there, like you could look over and see it through both woods. It's troubling to me that the landfill, as we were driving, the landfill portion of the property seemed to be in the middle portion of the property. So we drove all the way around it, entered, and then went to the right. We literally circled it. I would just say that if the owner is willing to take care of the landfill, it would give me more encouragement than purchasing it the way that it is now and having the county do that, because the landfill was a significant size. I'm going to be honest, I was a little stunned at how big it was. So that's just my take on it, but I did tour this property.
I'm happy to modify it. Like this, like that. Okay, it's not just a street. Just to ask if it's on a, or if county council is pursuing this, or staff is that they really consider all options to exclude or, clean up the landfill and outstanding issues we discuss. Cattle or partnerships. Maybe that's all over the place. A better language.
The cattle, because I toured, I don't know if I'm privy to this or if it's basically that the cattle is a cattle lease right now. The cattle that's on there, they're leasing the land for cattle lease.
This is bumping up against, I think, the earlier discussion, what's A and what's B. And are we at the circumstances for actively pursuing something? We're talking about things that we would like to see. I'm just posing that to you because it's a continuing discussion and it will keep coming up. discuss those.
Absolutely, I agree. It's a good discussion, I appreciate that. I do think in this case, though, for sure, no one else will take the lead, so to speak. We don't have water management district or something else. It's only, it's kind of up to us, I guess, in that sense. Again, it's a value degree of finding, partners. And so I'd like to, again, that was the reason behind why it should be on acres, otherwise it would fall off. No longer pursue it, but perhaps we could work out. So that's, it's up to us. I think there's no chance that before us, we said it should be on one of the lists. I don't think it does any good to do it. It's not being negotiated anymore. So, of course, they could bring it back. It's to be active participant. That's why we say
Quick question, before we vote, we're voting on is A or B. If it fails to pass as a motion on A, does it automatically drop to B? Do we need a second motion to put it on B?
The resolution doesn't speak that automatically drops to B.
So it would be cleaner if we had if any motion fails going forward.
Yes, sir.
We had to need a second motion, sir.
And just from a procedural standpoint, this committee's engaged in some really good discussions this morning. I just want to reiterate to the committee that, per the resolution, the committee's job this morning, based on the previous site ranking criteria, as you rank these properties, is to determine whether it's A or B. And in the resolution, it talks about each property within Group A shall significantly further the goals of the Volusia Forever program based on the same site ranking criteria for the property. Each property within Group A should be eligible for matching funds from other sources. And then it goes on and talks about Group A as an active acquisition list. And a lot of these concerns that have been rightfully so brought up by the committee and well received will be addressed during the acquisition process itself. We go through the environmental surveys, we survey the property, we get a title commitment for the property. So there's all kinds of things that will bring a lot of this stuff to life if the property makes it on to the active acquisition list. And we find a funding partner to move forward with it, that we will review those conditions at that time. And so I just want to bring that to the committee's attention this morning, that the committee's job this morning is to determine whether it's on the A or B list, and the acquisition process takes care of itself according to the
Question about that though. Can we make recommendations other than A and B list? Can we make A or B, but subject to conditions being met in the process that we can change our vote, or is that just all part of what you were just saying, let it ride? Sounds like one we would get say, one you just had to say.
When you say you have to say, sir, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, we would have it would come back to this committee. If we make these conditions, then would it automatically go to that, whatever the conditions met? Can we put any conditions on an A or B?
Typically, no, the resolution doesn't speak.
All I need to thank you.
Linda?
I'm sorry, just for clarification, right now, the applicant has submitted this with the landfill. There has been discussion about taking that out, but that has not formally occurred. So we're making our vote based on the property with the landfill.
Here, I'm going to say that's an accurate assessment.
All right, thank you.
Call the question. Repeat the motion, please.
Okay, I mean, I can't include the issue, I guess. So, my motion was a list to consider other partnerships and pursuing that manner actively, I suppose. Role and I would like to look at it. Yes,
I heard a lot of words, but A list is what you're saying.
yes, I
A list.
the motion is great.
And that's been seconded. Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Motion fails.
I move we put this property on the B list.
Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we move on to the next, if I may, ask committee members, and I've already sent a note down to my staff as well, that we need to be speaking loudly or clearly into the microphone, so people online are having trouble hearing us, and also hinders us when we try to do the minutes and listen to the recording. So please speak more clearly and loudly into the microphone.
Thank you. Could we use a 5-minute break? With that, we will take a 5-minute break, please. We'll resume at this time. We have everyone missing. We now have the committee seated. Okay.
Madam Chair, could I ask a question? I just want clarification. Based on our former forever, I do not recall that we ever discussed conditions. We looked at the applicant as it was presented to us and voted it A group or B group based on what was in front of us then. And my understanding is, or was at that time, that conditions weren't part of it, that it was either up or down, A or B. Is that still the case? Am I thinking correctly here?
Yes, ma'am, you are based on the current resolution. That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay. With that clarification, we'll resume. This is item 9.
All right, up for consideration is Deep Creek Reserve, a 300-acre conservation easement application located down in the Osteen Baytown area. It is in the wildlife corridor. Plus the Farmington Green Key Conservation Area, and it's being actively managed with prescribed bond.
This is a beautiful piece of property. I would like to place it on the A list, please.
Noted that property as well, and it is an instance.
Motion and a second. Discussion. No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So the next piece of property for your consideration is titled Resicar Trust. Step away from the item and say, I can already hear this microphone's picking me up much better. And to everyone else on the committee there, please lean into your mics. I guess the system is having trouble picking some of us up here. So I think we've solved that problem at this table. So Resicar Trust, 170 acres. This is the piece that the staff from the city of DeBary spoke on at the beginning here. It is within the Florida Forever Ocala Greenway. It's got attributes including the wildlife corridor, has historical resources on the property. The city has come forward and they have proposed a match amount. They would take over management and development of the property. It's across the creek from Black Bear Wilderness area. And they are actively pursuing a Florida Forever application on this property at this time also. Property, as you noted in the report, it does have some uplands on it. These tend to be large oak dominated hardwood hammocks again with some open, almost pasture-like areas underneath. There's a large berm that runs along the St. Johns River here, and behind the berm is this open pasture that you see in the photographs, just dotted with a couple of heavily buttressed cypress trees there. There's cattle lease on this property also. And with that, I'll turn it over to any questions.
Can I understand, since this is also being pursued by Florida Forever, are there any implications in terms of management and use, whether we're the partner or they are the partner?
So Florida Forever means that they traditionally hold title to properties that they financially participate in. It's my understanding after conversations with the city of DeBary that they've actively discussed their intended use for this property. The state can issue use agreements or minor fee leases essentially for the use of the property by local municipalities. And it sounds like based on those conversations that all of their plans are compatible with the state's criteria.
Mr. Manager, did you wish to make a statement? Or are you just moving up to be available?
Yes, I can answer any questions there. We've applied and the board of trustees approves the boundary amendment to this property in May of 2021 to come across the river to include this particular property. They are actively pursuing it. And whether we have a partnership with Volusia County or the partnership with Volusia County and Florida Forever is to be determined, depending on whether it meets their particular purchasing criteria. So,
Okay. Is your contribution anticipated three-way split? Is that what I'm asking?
no, the contribution is 3-to-1. On the application is 3-to-1 with Volusia County. We're trying to find the simplest partnership. As I said, the future land use of the 17 acres is 4 homes an acre. Possible 68 homes on this particular 17 acres on the river. And so the pressures, and the DeBerry is growing like crazy. The pressures of this property is severe in that it will getting quite a lot of offers on this particular property to build it, and the 152 acres being used as their amenities rather than the company's.
Thank you.
Can we learn more about the current cattle lease and the future of?
The cattle lease is with a partner, property that's just north of this. They share in this cattle lease. The cattle actually belong to what we call Riverbend North, which is 110 acres to the north. That cattle lease can be severed upon the purchase of this particular property and will be.
So the intent is to sever the cattle lease once this all transfers over.
Yes.
Anybody want to talk on that?
Why are you going to sever the cattle lease?
Well, unless, if we develop this particular property for the public, intermingling cattle and the public, we'll have to figure out how that occurs.
My only point is don't rule it out, because a lot of that land is being maintained now by those cows, the taxpayers will have to do ultimately. So a lot of times it's good to work with them. Be friendly to cows, don't be so.
I'm sure we can find a little piece of the property if that's so desired. But
Well, it's just, my point is, do not rule them out as part of the management practice. St. John's uses it all up and down the river basin to help keep out invasive species. Because if this is not managed properly by people, then now you have a problem that's going to cost you more and more. So my only point is, don't rule out the lowly cow development.
Understand.
Thank you. Any other questions? Discussion? Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion, put it on the A list.
Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
All right, next up for consideration is the Lucas Nursery Farm. A simple acquisition of 160 acres down the Houston Baytown area in the wildlife corridor and abuts the Wiregrass Prairie Preserve on 2 sides. Currently, you can see there is palm tree row crops, I guess, and some open areas that are already vacated where it's stopped growing. That I'll turn it over to the question.
Yeah, I'd let Nick, what's the staff's view on this? Is this a valuable piece to add to the other properties down there, or is this going to be way too much work?
The location of this property will provide good expansion of the Wiregrass Prairie Preserve, given this location.
So you guys staff thinks it's a good idea to add this?
Location wise, yes, a lot of the management decisions that will need to be made down the road will be made at the staff.
I notice this has an out parcel with access rights coming through.
You are correct. There is a piece of property adjacent. The owner has some access rights through this piece.
Well, that's different. And it has a lot, potentially, is that what I'm reading, a lot of restoration work?
Yes, the restoration on this particular piece, because it is a palm tree operation, it's extensive to do restoration.
Is there existing inventory there now?
Yes, there is currently existing.
And that this becomes, are they retain ownership of that? Are they gonna move it, or are you buying it? If we were to acquire this, acquire inventory also?
The discussions that we have had was that hopefully the inventory would be all gone by the time.
I'm sorry.
To me, this is sort of location. And it's going to take some restoration, but given the fact it is in the wildlife corridor, we made a commitment as a county to the wildlife corridor. The fact that it does about the way that very preserved, to me, I think that.
Just a quick question. The consumption use permit, do we see that as a benefit for management or just
Given the location of the property, say the two wells that are on the property would be a benefit.
So,
And I know that it has been submitted to Florida Forever as a potential state acquisition, is that correct?
no, I don't believe this one has been submitted.
It's in priority one area, maybe that's what you're looking
It is within the Volusia Conservation Corridor.
it says it could be submitted?
Could be submitted, I'm sorry, could be submitted. And that would be our submission or the,
Yes, so procedurally, all the properties that are on the A list that are within a Florida Forever boundary, after April 5th, county council meeting, staff will have a meeting with Florida Department of Environmental Protection staff, essentially what they call their triage division, which is property that's already within a Florida Forever boundary area. And we'll discuss their interest in the property and come up with an acquisition plan if there is a willingness on the state side to move forward.
One last question for Nick. Does Wiregrass currently have county road or public access? Or is it on private road?
Wiregrass Prairie Reserve does have public access here.
Oh,
any further questions? Discussion? Is there a motion?
I would like to make a motion that we put this property on the list.
second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Votes aye. There you go.
The next property for you to consider is titled Volusia Groves and Cattle. This is located in eastern DeLand, 128 acres in size. It's dominated by Moore Lake, a 16-acre lake up in the central to northern quadrant. It's got a diverse series of habitats on it. It extends from wetlands, which are contiguous off the property to the east, all the way up through flatwoods, and even to some communities that almost look scrubby in nature, but they're a little bit fire deprived right now. This is the piece that the city of DeLand spoke on this morning during public comments. They do desire to manage this property for passive recreation. With that, I'll turn it over to any questions.
I had a question looking at the drone video. And given the configuration of the lot lines, there's a notch that comes down into the lake, as I see it. And it appeared on the video that there was a cul-de-sac
Yes.
coming down there. Is that being developed
Like Parkville Stage, yes.
for homes?
Yes.
How does that notch affect public use?
I don't know that it would affect public use because there's another easement coming off of Martin Luther King to the south of there.
I guess I'm asking, does it affect the use of the lake? Are you going to have like kayaks or anything like that you anticipate, or not,
Yeah,
not on the water?
I don't know exactly what we would have. I just thought, as a scout leader, it would be kind of cool because there are some trails going through the property for people to be able to go out there and enjoy this ecological laboratory. And, so maybe kayaks, if that's, something that, the board and county council thinks, would be good as part of the passive recreation idea, which is floating that, because I think it's a really good piece for people to go out there and enjoy nature.
I have a question too. I believe it said something about an easement that's there. Is that along the golf course?
Say that.
The easement, is that along the golf course?
No, the golf course is in the hills.
Okay, so what is the?
It's an access easement. To be able to get to the property from MLK.
While I have you standing here,
Sure.
You mentioned earlier that the city has determined that the participant in the acquisition.
Yeah, and I'll admit, going into this, I didn't know that was something that the Forever program looked for. I mean, I heard the ideas about managing the property, and so, certainly if we're going to be turning it into passive recreation, it makes some sense for us to manage the property as well. But as we talked to your staff and, we looked at the history, I wasn't involved in the 2008 endeavor to get this property purchased. But there was a participation agreement that included a third, of the cost of the acquisition. So, obviously the city commission would have to approve that, but I think that they're all very eager to see this property be preserved. And I think that, see support from the city for that.
All right, I have a couple of questions. The easement, now, do you see this being a passive part just for those residents out there, or do you see that easement where a road would be put in where other citizens would be able to access that part?
This would be something for all Volusia County residents to be able to enjoy.
The other thing is some time ago, and I think when Larry Norman was your overarching recreation was what, 10 or 15 years ago, probably by the time the original Victoria was coming into play. They showed us trail system. They presented to the neighborhood out there that there was going to be a trail system that ran kind of up to almost like when it was set to the vision that as the land developed, they were going to have these passive hiking trails and biking trails. Is that still on the plans, or is that no longer? Because I don't see it happening. Yeah, the subdivisions that are going in, they just seem to be, their own little world.
We did a trail master plan back in 2004, the first segment of which was built from Victoria Park through downtown and through Stetson. We're actively working on an ECHO grant right now to do phase 2, which would go up Garfield to 92. Priority 3 would be going out Beersford to 4139, so that would connect with the trails, coming in through those subdivisions, and then the 4th would be from downtown out to Sunround.
But nothing running north and south through all that new development. Because at the time it looked cool. That's just why I'm bringing it up. I thought, man, that's going to be so nice because it would have tied in Crestwind. It would have tied them all in through a nice active, passive walking or biking trail.
We can certainly do that. As you probably know, we own the 13-acre piece immediately north of what I call Trails North and our fire station that's out there. That would actually be for active recreation. So, to your point, I think that's certainly something that we should
open it up. This is an absolutely beautiful piece. This is one of the nicest pieces that I've seen today as far as it's got so many possibilities. Sure. And houses being one of them. We got enough out there. So if we can keep it in some green space, I'm all for it. With that, I would move for it on the list. Thank you.
So I have a question. You are or you are not looking at putting bike trails on this property?
Oh, I wouldn't envision that you would actually have paved trails. I don't know that, and again, I'm new to this kind of thing, but I don't know that you'd want to take a piece of land like this and put paved trails on it. But there are trails through there that are unimproved, and that's kind of the vision that I have. Just so people can access and go in, and like I said, kind of like.
I had to ask because I don't live in the land, and when Becca brought up, I needed to.
It would actually be a nice spot for the trail to walk on.
Yeah, and we're certainly open to that. Like I said, this could be a real opportunity for us with that active recreation right across the street, passive recreation, here and trails all along, connecting to, our other trails that would actually go down the Beersford Avenue extension and to downtown and to the rest of the trails. And that actually connects with both the state and the county trail system as well.
So there was a motion, so I'll second that. I'd like to say thank you for the city planning area and city manager.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those like sign. Thank you, go ahead.
Up next for consideration is the Sternstein property, 71 acre fee simple application located in the southeast corner of the county. And it is in the wildlife corridor and abuts the Canal Road National Seashore. It does have a couple islands of live oak and some wetland with some ditches around.
My question is with the, I guess these are mosquito control ditches. Does mosquito control have any rights, existing rights associated with having created those ditches? I should know that, but I don't.
Look at John Gamble.
You know, I don't know when those were dug. I mean, it could have been in like the 20s and 30s. I don't know when that project was. We've never maintained those. They're jurisdictional wetlands. So if you don't maintain them regularly, unless you have easement over them or something, maintenance easement, I don't think that they could do anything. And they don't have any equipment now to go in there anyway. So that's not happening. So I would think that they have no, I don't even know if we sprayed that with a helicopter. I think that those areas don't produce anything. So.
We have someone wanting to public participation.
Well, my name's Howard Birch. I'm the co-owner of that sister. We spoke last time about this. The property was purchased for my father. Mosquito control came in 2 years after he was 53. We didn't have a say so in it. And they maintained it for 20, 30 years. And my understanding is it stopped the program. So it was counterproductive. It's left.
So when was the last maintenance thing that you?
I have because nobody ever told us. And when we'd asked, we got kind of halfway answers. We spent more time chasing people off and cutting our lock off and putting their lock on so they're fishing. We provided a drone video that all of you had a chance to see that shows, you look at the outskirts of the property, it's beautiful, it's pristine, nothing has ever been done. It's never been used for farming, it's never had a house put on it. It's not been touched anyway. And we've had control of the family since the 50s.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. I know staff has met with the Canaveral Seashore administrators. Not interested from that direction?
They will not be a funding partner.
What about management partner?
There's no indication that they want to take this on for management either.
And I see it could be submitted for Florida Forever.
It is within a Florida Forever boundary area. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Adjust this thing, but I just want to say, yeah, I do like where the location is of this, just on the water in that part of the county. Its use as being a viewpoint, I guess, as one thing that you mentioned for technology and so forth, but also it's just I don't know, I think more land like this in that area, I wish would come before us, so I do hope we can move forward with this, but yeah, I'm curious why there's no other
partners, it should, I can't speak for other agencies. Florida Forever come through, but some comments. I like this for this.
I see a notation about historical sites. Can you explain that?
So we do have a little bit of information here regarding the historical site. Over, Danielle, do you want to take that?
While she's doing that, Tim, did anybody talk to the National Wildlife Refuge?
Yes, the conversations with Canaveral National Seashore included the federal agencies. So
Well, Never won't speak for the Fish and Wildlife.
they were copied on communication.
But no one contacted them directly. Because they're the ones that are buying up the land around, it's not the seashore.
So I did reach out to them directly, and that's how I ended up at Canaveral. I did not get an answer from them.
Okay.
Do we know what the management responsibility would involve? I know we don't have other things in this area, I understood that, but I was trying to be clear in terms of what would actually be involved with managing this particular property.
The management responsibilities on a property like this would mainly be security, guidelines, gates, and if there is public access available, that would need to be managed as well. There's not a lot of saltwater activities.
Would we see this as a public access area? Is its value in that particular element, or is it in the reservation?
Staff would need to see a more thorough evaluation of the property to determine best uses for public access. It's not been determined this time.
Okay, as far as the historical resources, I don't have my map that tells me the secrets of what these are, but knowing the area, where they are, and the size, they're most likely going to be your shell beddings.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just, I have a question, technical question. I mean, and just making sure these numbers are copied correctly. You wrote that property appraised value is 62,000. That's not a typo, it's not like 620 or something. I'm seeing that. Just checking it. I'm going to defer to the reports, and that's, okay, I'll assume that's correct. So I mean, that is definitely a drop in the bucket compared to a lot of the so I mean, in terms of like what we'd actually spend, so I mean, 2 fields require this for a lot less. I think it's worth it for sure, but judging it based on that, but also it's with the implications. Just making sure that we have the correct numbers. I'd be happy to make a motion. I'd like to motion that this go on the A list.
I would second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same?
No.
Do that again.
Roll call, please.
Marianne Connors,
Yes.
Wanda Van Dam, Steve Crump,
No.
Gerald Feaser,
No.
John Gamble, Jessica Gao, Derek LaMontagne,
Yes.
Derek Orberg,
Yes.
Suzanne Schreiber.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, the next application is a less than fee conservation easement for the Wisniewski property, 69 acres in size, generally located in central western Volusia County. No potential matching funds identified. It is an NRMA overlay area. It is within the wildlife corridor that abuts the Clark Bay Conservation Area. We did have the opportunity to look at this property twice. It does have some silviculture in the central portion of it. Wetlands are connected with the Clark Bay Conservation Area.
Question on the reference to this community, floodplain swamp, may provide significant habitat for both fish and wildlife. Does may in that sentence, does it mean it could, or it maybe does? So, we know, I guess that's the question. Do we know if that is supporting?
So the reports that you're reviewing today represent staff's on-the-ground observations regarding the natural communities, Florida Inland Natural Areas classification of those natural communities. But there hasn't been a wildlife study to back up those statements. What we've done when we see that language, we've identified the natural community in the field, we've come back to the office, reviewed the Florida Natural Areas inventory description, and included a lot of the language in there about the habitat type or the endemic animals that you might observe on the property, but it doesn't represent a staff observation.
Thank you. And there's reference to the property having a forest stewardship plan approved through the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service. So what is the implication of that in terms of going forward with the easement?
So it represents that the owner has worked with the USDA to incorporate best management practices for the silviculture areas that are on the property. The easement, again, these easements are intended to both protect the natural resources that are on the property and continue land management activities that are positive in nature. So we haven't gotten to the point of discussing actual terms of a conservation easement, but from staff's perspective, it would be important to include in the easement, A, the ability for the landowner to continue those activities, and B, the obligation to continue those activities to try to have these ecosystems as healthy as possible.
As an easement, the owner would continue to be responsible for the management.
Yes, ma'am.
Questions? Discussion?
How far away is this from the Stones? Is it Stone Street? Yeah, how far away are they from each other?
200 yards.
200 yards. I would move to put that on the A list, please.
Second. Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Next up for consideration is a 41-acre fee simple application of Baker property. Also located down in the Christine Maytown area. Deep Creek flows along the western boundary of the property. It's in the wildlife corridor. I can add that it is directly north of the Deep Creek Reserve. This presenter.
It's not actually adjacent, is that correct, to these properties?
Correct, there's a highway.
So Palm Bluff Conservation I'm seeing is to the north and west, and then Deering Preserve and Deep Creek, south and east. Does it enhance? What does it do in terms of enhancing this corridor?
It does provide an ecological system for the area.
how difficult would this be to maintain? Is it the size big enough where you're, spend a ton of resources or anticipate pretty passive use?
It is a smaller property and is isolated from any other property currently under management. It does consist of mostly wetland areas along Deep Creek or upland. But it is not a lot of drought fire would be anticipated.
That you would not have to control burn that, because you'll let that become a natural.
Yes, should be budgeted. So management will consist of securing the property and any recreation uses.
You can see it, maybe, is that possible to have a parking corral and a high trailer walking, passive walking for the public, or?
It would be a very short trail.
Very short trail.
So looking at the Florida Forever map, the conservation corridor basically is following Deep Creek as a boundary. And so I'm asking, was that a mapping accommodation? I mean, it seems like it's conceivable that that corridor boundary could also jump the creek.
Yes, this is a great question, and a bit of a challenge to answer directly, because there's a number of factors that could be at play here. And I do not know the history of the development of the conservation corridor. It's really a challenge to answer. It certainly can be the case that the environmental attributes that were identified in the Volusia Conservation Corridor extend onto this property. Florida Forever is a willing seller program also. It could be as simple as the owner just declined at that time to participate in the Florida Forever program.
Also, almost this entire property was flooded in 2005. Water running away. So it's a good property for the house. Floodplain.
So in that context, we don't have an identified funding partner at this time.
That's an accurate statement.
This property checks quite a few boxes that I look for. Like fresh water, road access. It's small.
And some of the hidden benefits of the property might be because the front porch is zoned for agricultural uses. It is a good corridor for kind of passive stormwater treatment through the wetland system before it gets as well.
And as such, could be a potential funding partner.
I'd like to make a motion to put this on the A list.
Because, it's a get the water out treated.
And I'm going to just raise a historical reference, which is probably well outdated at this point. Basin studies were done in a lot of these areas, and I believe this was one. This goes back to the 90s. But basin studies were done to try and anticipate what kinds of properties could be valuable in terms of stormwater issues within those basins. So,
This one was redone after.
the flooding.
Yeah, and after the light.
Okay.
Suzanne made a motion.
I made a motion to put this on the A list.
Motion, second,
I'll second.
motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
for coming. I appreciate the staff listing all the species as well, creatures and all the plants and stuff. And you can just copy the agenda, please check out all the cool animals that are on all these plants throughout the place. A lot of ones I've never even heard of. Thank you. This is the last property for your consideration this morning. Helen Pomeranke, fee simple application for 19 acres within the city of Boynton Beach. It is abutting the Tomoka River. It contains a Bear Creek tributary. It's also north of Riverbend Nature Park, which is characterized as a combination of passive and active recreation, in my opinion. Property is at that typical edge effect. It does have a lot of dense vegetation along the roadway area. You transition down into a hardwood hammock, and then as you continue on, it moves into your more deeper wetland systems as you get closer to the Tomoka River. We have viewed this property twice. If there's any questions from the committee, we're happy to address them.
Any update from the city?
No indication that City of Boynton Beach would be a financial plan.
Don't they have a park right by it?
They do. There's a park just to the south of this piece.
Have they expressed any interest in managing this park?
Yes.
I toured this property. And I toured this property, and it's being used by someone. There may be a homeless camp, we're not quite sure, but regardless, there's already kind of trails through the property, so people are riding bikes and things back there, and it's directly north of their city park, one of the city parks there. And there is drainage through a pipe under the road that comes out on that side. And I've walked up and down with Tim. It's disappointing that the city is not willing to come forward and put money towards the purchase of the property. The way that DeLand did, and Barry as well.
So can I just ask, then that they should not be rewarded?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I was just asking if you think that we should maybe treat those two properties since we do want to reward DeLand for being a good partner.
Well, I had this discussion with Tim, quite frankly, that I would hope that any city that has submitted properties would come forward and put, or requested, for land to be purchased, that they would contribute towards the purchase. I think that shows good faith. They have recently put I guess Tim, you would call that a mountain bike trail? Is that what that's referred to?
On the city park you referred to?
Yes.
Yes, that is a mountain bike trail.
So the mountain bike trail would, the way I see it from touring it, would continue through this property. And if the city, but the residents rose up and did that. The city did not do the mountain bike trail, is my understanding from reading the article in the paper. So I think that that's what the presumed plan would be. No one told me this, but from going in the city park and then also going to the other property right next to it. So it would just make sense if the city would have stepped up and put money towards the purchase.
Any further discussion? Is there a motion?
Make a motion to put this on the list.
I'll second that.
Motion in a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Can we advance one more slide, please? So this is a snapshot of your flow chart. We've circled the area that is the purpose of today's meeting. You've now completed the process of sorting into the A and B list. The next step is for staff to take your recommendation to county council, which we're targeting April 5th. The final slide that we have before you today is your schedule for upcoming meetings. We're going to open up the next cycle April 1st. We'll see you folks again on June 22nd to do the eligibility process for any applications that are received at that time. And then we'll repeat today's meeting on August 24th. I only have one more item that I wanted to hit on today. I don't know if you'll just indulge me for a minute. I just want to say that I just want to say thank you to the committee members for your engagement in this process. This has been a high volume of material, and I know that we've given it to you in a short period of time. So I appreciate the effort that the committee has put in reviewing and preparing for today's meeting and for the January 26th meeting. I also want to reflect that same gratitude towards my colleagues here at Volusia County. The efforts that you see before you today extended beyond the staff that is sitting before you or has spoken. Everybody knows Nick to my right, and everybody knows Brad. Kendra, Jill, Susie, Danielle, and Kelly also deserve a big thank you for all the work that they put in to get us here today. So I just want to say thank you.
Likewise, a massive body of paper is a massive body of work. They go together, and you can tell how many people must have been involved in order to produce this much information. So thank you to the students.
I want to thank Tim for going 2 different days to tour properties with me and additional staff that went. I really appreciate your time in doing that.
You're very welcome, and the same offer is extended to any committee members. As we move through future application cycles, if there's a piece of property you want to put your feet on and see it, just make contact with me and we'll make arrangements to get you out there.
In terms of the flow chart, I see that the county council is coming up April 5th. Is that what I heard?
That is correct.
Do you want committee members to be there? I will plan to be there.
If they so choose. Typically, we've asked the chair to be there with ECHO, but if committee members like to attend to show support, that certainly is welcome.
Thank you.
May I make one comment just to build on? So one of the things I want to discuss with the committee is just kind of having an expectation setting conversation regarding our engagement with Florida Forever. And so we today, through your action and recommendation, we'll be sitting down, as Tim said, with Florida Forever for the projects that are within boundaries. And that triage process, they will select. They're not going to, and from my experience and understanding, they will pick and choose projects. They're not going to pick every single project that we submit. So with that being said, if a project is selected, it typically takes 18 to 24 months to work through the Florida Forever process because it goes all the way to the governor for his signature. So it's a little different than what we've been used to in the past when we've acquired that property with the water management district. But as we move through that process going forward from this meeting, we will have as an agenda item an update on where we are. So I just wanted to provide that education and also share with you that we will keep you abreast of what's happening, but typically 2 years is what we're looking at until a piece is fully acquired through the Florida Forever program.
Thank you.
Tim, one question. August 24th, have you the first week in September?
So we haven't advertised these meetings. I think there is some flexibility.
will be in the state.
Let us work on that. We may need to get some type of a poll set up to see if there's an open window where we can get all the committee members together.
Wanda?
The monies that are being spoken about statewide for wildlife corridor, is that separate from Florida Forever, or is that a portion of Florida Forever, or is that another pot of money, so to speak?
It's another pot of money. So there's two pots right now. So the state appropriation from state taxes, which was $100 million to Florida Forever for the fiscal year that will end in July. Right now, I haven't seen what then that number will be like for next year. In addition, there was $300 million in ARPA funds that came to Florida from the federal government that were allocated to wildlife corridor purchases. As previously shared when we met with DEP staff, that funding had been committed, but DEP had not received it yet, so they had not spent any of that wildlife corridor funding. But the decision to spend that will be made at the staff level at DEP. So when projects come in the door, if it's in a project area and in the corridor, then at that time they'll make the decision as to whether to use the state appropriation or the federal appropriation.
The wildlife corridor funding is all going to go to DEP and then distributed through them?
It will be distributed through the Florida Forever program.
Through the Florida Forever program?
Yes.
It's a separate entity, but through the program?
Correct. So it's typically, the way that they described it is it will be a budget decision made at the staff level. Now they just have two pots of money to run the Florida Forever program.
Any further business? That being said, motion to adjourn. We are adjourned.